Councillor George Lindars-Hammond, Cabinet Member for Health and Social Care.
Thank you. Abby?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Abtisam Mohammed, Cabinet Member for Education and Skills.
Thank you. Paul?
I am Councillor Paul Wood. I'm the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhoods and Community Safety.
Mary?
Hello, I'm Councillor Mary Lead. I'm Cabinet Member for Culture, Parks and Leisure.
Thank you. Terry?
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Terry Fox, Deputy Leader, Cabinet Member for Finance, Governance and Resources.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is apologies.
Yes, Chair, I've received apologies for absence from Councillor Mazar Iqbal.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 3, are there any items on the agenda where the public and press need to be excluded?
There are none, Chair.
Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are any members wishing to declare any interest on any items of business today? Silence is golden. Thank you very much. Item 5, minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 18th of November. Can we agree those as a correct record?
Yes, Chair.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6, public questions and petitions. First of all, are there any petitions?
None, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, public questions. I understand we have a series of questions from members of the public. Would we like to bring in the first member of the public? Mr. Buxton. I can see your name, I can't see your face, and I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, we can't see you. Is that okay? You're not waiting to try and get your equipment
Sorry,
working?
I'm just catching up with the host.
No, that's fine. That's it, there you are.
Okay. The first question I have to ask is, further to the Council's promise to archive information relating to the scandalous street tree felling programme in Sheffield, can the Council confirm and categorically ensure that all information and data related to and associated with the Streets Ahead contract, and indeed the contract procurement project itself, which preceded the signing of the Streets Ahead contract, is retained and not deleted prior to archiving, whether or not the information is considered suitable for public release? Second question, with respect to the Council's standing orders, sometimes referred to as rules, please can the Council specify and explain in detail their interpretation of the word may, and furthermore also confirm or deny that in law the words may and shall have very different and distinct meanings. Third question, further to the leader, Councillor Dawes' statement made at Cabinet on the 18th of November 2020, can the leader confirm that all the decisions made that resulted in the illegal and very costly, both in terms of cash and reputation, pursuit of the street tree felling programme in Sheffield by Amy, pursuant to the Streets Ahead contract, were as a direct result of taking officers' advice? Why were pertinent questions not asked by the leader and Cabinet members when it became clearly apparent something very wrong was happening, and in turn avoid a less than positive legacy? Fourth question, The leader of the council, Julie Dorr, has previously stated on record that she first heard of the Forestry Commission's investigation into the legality of the street tree felling programme in Sheffield from myself on a Radio Sheffield phone-in, no less than 4 months after officers were informed. Is this true? If so, is this acceptable? And was any review of the councillors concealing, of officers concealing information commissioned, or indeed was any disciplinary action taken? And if not, why not?
Okay, Mr. Buxton, does that conclude your questions? I think it does. Yes.
It does for now, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, your first question regarding the archive. Councillor Mark Jones, I will ask him to respond to this. I'm sure that you can have a much more comprehensive response in writing, because we have responded to various people actually regarding this particular issue. So if Mark would initially respond to the question.
With regard to that, could I ask that any written response is minuted as part of this meeting, rather than just given to individuals? Thank you.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm sorry to say that we don't do that. We minute the meeting that occurred actually within the meeting. That's what minutes of a meeting are. If there's any correspondence via email, which I get on a regular basis, like hundreds a day, we don't minute that anywhere.
With regard to standing orders, I would dispute that. And I have had various conversations with Paul Robinson about releasing answers to written questions at Cabinet and full council meetings.
If we agree to respond in writing, then we do that. But I think Mark's going to respond verbally. Mark?
Yes, Chair. Thanks, Julie. Good afternoon, Justin. I hope you're well. Generally, the council does comply with the Information Commissioner's requirements in terms of keeping of data, which is usually for a finite period. However, as we've stated previously, because of the significance of the Street Tree Archive and the information that's going to go in there, we will be preserving data beyond that normal window and making sure that the data will go back. As I've stated previously, we are eager to get the archive established as soon as possible and to cover the period outlined by the Ombudsman's report. And then once established, we will then put in all pertinent information that we can gain going further back. And I see no reason why we wouldn't want to include the information from the previous administration, the Lib Dems, on the draft documents that fed into the Street Tree contract. So we will see what we can do and make sure that we get all pertinent information into the archive as possible. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Buxton.
Thank you.
And I have previously and publicly agreed with that response, that I don't see any reason why it has to be constrained within a period of 2015 to whatever the cut-off date is. And I think we should go as far back as is possible.
Okay, just
and legal.
Yeah. The latter part of that question, can you confirm that the information will be archived, whether or not it's considered suitable for public release?
I will have to take advice from legal, but I think that there shouldn't be anything that's particularly excluded from the archive for that, other than maybe materials pertinent to court appearances or other privileged documents. Otherwise, everything that is possible to be made public will be made public.
I can give you a list of documents that have been claimed to have legal and professional privilege applied, and they.
Okay.
Well, I'll give you a list, anyways, Mark.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Buxton.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you would like to put forward any documents or information that you are aware of, and you want to check or receive affirmative response that they will be included, then please do send them on.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next question regarding the standing orders, I don't know if Terry wishes to try and respond to this. I mean, for me, it's just common sense. The words may and shall do have different and distinct meanings. However, Terry.
Thanks, Chair, and Mr. Buxton. Well, it's difficult to give a precise answer without having the full context, but at face value, may implies a discretion and shall implies an obligation. But you can often have a discretion as to how an obligation is actually implemented. So without going any further, that's basically all I've got to say on this. Thank you.
Interesting.
Okay. Right. Right. The next two questions. Right. Question number 3. I'm not taking the question, Mr. Buxton, for the simple reason you consistently use the word illegal in the illegal pursuit of street tree felling programme. The replacement and replenishment of street trees has never been found to be illegal. And if you constantly and persisting using that word, I'm not accepting it.
Said that 600 trees were felled illegally.
No, it's not been deemed or found to be illegal. So I'm not taking the question.
That's very interesting. In your last day as leader of the council, that you're refusing a question because of me including the word illegal. You could just ignore that and answer the question.
You could just remove it.
I feel that you're actually purposefully obfuscating.
And I'm not, because I've already answered the question before, that all decisions that this council takes as members, whether it's via individual cabinet members or the cabinet, are all taken on advice and guidance from officers. That is what they are paid to do. So I've answered the question, I've answered it previously, and I've just answered it again. But the point I'm making is if you persistently come in here and make allegations without evidence, then I'm not prepared to engage in that. I've said it before, and
I think if you read the Forestry Commission report, you realise where the evidence is.
Mr. Buxton, I'm not taking that question.
Report?
I'm going to answer question number 4 and say that I was told about the Forestry Commission investigation, because as I understand it, it was you, not you individually, but some of the campaigners that referred the case to the Forestry Commission in the first place. So of course you would know before I would. So if you then therefore inform me about that, that's fine. I was informed about it.
It was 4 months after
got,
senior officers were informed by the Forestry Commission.
We had the Forestry Commission report. We thoroughly and robustly went through it, and we've responded to it. Craig, would you please remove Mr. Buxton from the room? I have answered the question.
No, you haven't.
The Forestry Commission report as thank you. Next, please. I think it's Mike. I'm not sure. Mike Hodson. Yeah,
Right.
there you are.
Okay, you can hear me and you can see me. That's good.
We can, yes.
Thank you. All right, so my questions are for Councillor Mary Lee, although it may be that there might be part of the question where you yourself might possibly wish to answer. So question 1 is, could Councillor Lee or whoever update us on the status of the council's or Parks and Countryside Services involvement table published in 2016, and on the status of the council's guidance for consultations? I'm not sure what the date for that is. And could she, Councillor Lee, comment on the conflict between those guidance publications and the current consultation about the extension of the Wagon and Horses public house into Millhouses Park? That's my first question. Right, second question is, could Councillor Lee inform us how many specific responses to the above consultation have been received to date? And by specific responses, I don't mean just people apparently viewing things. I'm asking for specific responses to this consultation. And the second part of that question, what, if any, further measures are being taken to inform the public and local residents in particular that this consultation is taking place? Thank you.
Right, thank you. I think Mary's able to answer both of those questions. So if I do need to respond further, I will do so. Mary?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hodson, for bringing your questions. First of all, I don't think there's any conflict with the involvement table and the council's guidance on consultations with regard to the proposals for the Wagon and Horses development at Millhouses Park, where consultations have been moved to, at the moment, consultations have been moved to being exclusively online because of the global pandemic and the desire and the need to keep people safe. And that's how we've been conducting our consultations in certainly in our Parks and Countryside service over this last 9 months, is it now? So that's been routine. So that's and those the guidance you refer to is obviously referred to by officers. In terms of your second question, we've had about 641 responses so far. That was from lunchtime yesterday. And I think you've had that information. I'm not sure if you've had it up to date from yesterday, but you've had some information on that, as I understand it. In terms of what we have done, posters which include QR codes linking directly to the consultation have been displayed in Millhouses Park. Secondly, the information was sent out in our Parks and Countryside email bulletins. That was from the 12th of November to those who subscribe to Parks updates and in my local area. So that topic has reached about 13,500 people. And it's also been promoted on Parks and Countryside social media channels, and that reaches thousands of followers. I couldn't give you the exact number, but thousands of followers. So it is quite, the consultation is quite widespread. The 641 responses we've had so far, I understand, is considered excellent for this kind of consultation. So that's the state of the consultation so far. So I don't see any conflict, as I said, with the guidelines we've got and the consultation that's taken place, given the absolute constraints we're in at the moment. Okay, that's
it. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Have a nice Christmas, hopefully.
And you all, yes, especially you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Craig, next. I've got them in a different order on my sheet, so I'm not sure who's going to pop up. I think we've got Mr. Johnson and Mr. Slack. So, Mr. Slack.
Hopefully
there you are.
See and hear me.
Yes, and see you.
Good. Thank you very much. It's interesting and pleasing to see that your final cabinet meeting, Chair, is just as entertaining as they have been for the last 8 years that I've been involved in them.
I would be disappointed myself if it wasn't. Thank you, Mr. Buxton.
Before I answer questions, I'd just like to say that I will miss the Chair as she steps down next month. We haven't always seen eye to eye by any means, but have, I hope, reached an appreciation that we each are trying to achieve the best for the city. She has not, in my opinion, been well served by some of her most senior officers, and certainly not by some of her cabinet colleagues. The vagaries of party divided against itself. It's sad that she's leaving under the cloud of COVID-19 and the increasing threat that brings to the security and viability of the city economy and treasury. We have testing times ahead. But I wish Councillor Dorr a safe Christmas and a long and peaceful retirement.
Thank
But
you.
now to questions. Pleasure. Now to questions. Question 1. With the news on Saturday that a Sheffield block of apartments has had its top 4 floors evacuated for fire regulation failures, affecting 35 residences, what steps will Council take to ensure that the current popularity within planning for very tall residential blocks are not putting residents at risk? After all, we know developers tell lies and that they often change planning conditions after permissions are granted. Will Council also be undertaking reviews of previously accepted applications to ensure the builders and developers are meeting the exact conditions of the planning approvals, unlike the Hanover Tower situation? And question 2, can Council comment, and I appreciate it may not be the chair that responds to this, on whether there is any plan to reshuffle the cabinet following the installation of the new leader, and whether this is in the best interest of the city in the midst of the current crisis? Thank you.
Whoa, well, both those questions are directed at Councillor Bob Johnson. So if Bob would like to respond.
Julie. Yeah, happily. Are you ready for a long-winded explanation, Nigel? I'm sure you are. They generally tend to be. So first of all, can I clarify that planning approval does not deal with construction or internal building safety issues. Instead, those issues are controlled at the construction stage under the building regulations. Developers have a choice now whether they use our local authority building control or whether they use effectively the private sector. And that is their choice to use an approved building inspector. In the case of this site, it is understood that it was the latter route that the developer chose, and that may or may not come as a surprise to you. Subsequent maintenance of the building and compliance with fire safety regulations are the responsibility of the building owner. It is the building owners to ensure that once completed and occupied, safety regulations are adhered to. If matters come to the council's attention whereby buildings are subsequently altered by removal of key internal fire protection systems, then the council will look at each case as it arises and take action where necessary with fire authority partners. The private sector housing team within Housing Neighbourhood Service routinely inspect private sector buildings and regulate this. They collect all the data regarding the sector and risks addressed through their powers post-construction. The council has successfully taken enforcement action on a number of buildings in the city recently, where some building owners and management agents are not maintaining their buildings and not addressing fire safety breaches. For the buildings in the news recently, where prohibition notices have been served, we are reviewing what was installed at construction stage and how the block has been maintained in following years to understand legal responsibilities, ensure that leaseholders are not being overcharged for works that should have been addressed prior to the completion stage. Our priority is, as ever, with resident safety. The council has a board of governance in place that which is also attended by the fire service, and the oversight of all existing buildings, both those new ones and those coming through the planning system, will go through that process. I'm not sure whether Councillor Wood may have got some further news to add on that, but coming to your second question, Mr. Slack, no, I'm not in a position to comment right now, but thank you for your concern and thanks for your question.
Thank you, Nigel. I do think though, Paul Wood wishes to answer a question.
I think Paul may have got a little more detail as to what we've done over that specific case that Mr. Slack and a few others. So I think Paul's been more involved than I have, so he may be able to give a bit more information.
Okay, Paul.
Okay. Apologies for the rain on the conservatory roof. If you can hear it, it's a bit deafening in here. Firstly, hope you have a very good Christmas, Nigel, and thank you for this question because it gives me the opportunity to tell you what we are doing, but also to thank the staff that have been involved with this. Once we have any notification from South Yorkshire Fire and Rescue, we move immediately, and this was actioned within an hour of the prohibition notice being put on. The staff in the department that I have a responsibility for got everyone rehomed within a number of hours, and I think they did a fantastic job and should be congratulated, as they did on the previous prohibition notice. But what we did immediately as well, I wrote to the government minister. That resulted in a telephone conversation yesterday on how we can try and resolve this to get people back there as quickly but safely as possible. We've asked for a number of things, which we're waiting for confirmation. If we get them, we'll be able to take action to get people returned. But it's a little bit premature as this all happened in a meeting yesterday evening. So we're waiting to hear back from MHCLG and the government minister concerned. But as a council, we've made representations on a number of occasions now, and one that we've made on regular timelines is the building control issues that we feel we should have the control back within the council for. This is where it falls down badly, and in respect to that, I had a meeting with Thangham Debonair, which is the Labour's shadow housing minister yesterday, who's going to try and get that incorporated into the white paper to bring forward as an amendment to the government legislation. So we are working actively on this. Like I say, have a nice Christmas, and a massive thanks to all the staff in the rehoming service who have just been absolutely fantastic yet again when we have an emergency. Thank you.
And thanks for your specific update, Paul. And just to reiterate, have a great Christmas, Mr. Slack, and hope to see you in the new year.
Oh, I'll definitely be there in the new year, Councillor Johnson. And thank you for the answers. I think there's a much longer conversation required about planning issues at some point when we're able to actually have that sort of conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, there is a lot going on, isn't there, nationally around that particular issue. So again, my personal best wishes, Nigel. I'm sure we'll be coming into contact with each other sometime in the future. You never know, I might become an active citizen myself in my retirement. But I do wish you all the best. You've always come into the meetings throughout my tenure particularly, and been extremely polite and courteous, very challenging, albeit, but certainly we've had some very interesting discussions because you bringing them to our attention. So thank you very much. I wish you all the best for Christmas and the new year, but I'll certainly be seeing you in the new year as a backbencher up to May 2021. So best wishes.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you in the public gallery at some point.
Bye-bye now. Mr. Johnson with us.
There he is.
There you are, Mr. Johnson. Would you like to ask your questions?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Oh, sorry about that, people.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Can you hear me,
That's fine,
Chair?
perfectly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Apologies for the delay. As Nigel is, I'm always polite, Julie, and I'd like to have that noted. Anyway, good afternoon, everybody. Chair, Cabinet, officers, thank you for allowing me these questions, and season's greetings to you all. I've got 4 questions. I'll run through them fairly briefly. At a previous meeting, I asked when and how the leader became aware of the alleged wrist injury suffered by a member of the Amy Savoca staff during the opposition to probably, I'll insert that qualifier word there, bearing in mind your previous comment, Councillor Dorr, probably illegal tree felling on Mearsbrook Park Road.
Mr. Johnson, please, I will not take the question. It is not deemed illegal, so please remove that word. Otherwise, I won't take the question.
Possibly.
No, it's not possibly. Bring the evidence, prove it's illegal, and then it can be accepted. But please remove the word.
Okay, I will withdraw the word illegal.
Thank you.
If the leader was not aware of this alleged injury to a member of staff, did Mr. Mothersole fail to inform her? I know this because Mr. Mothersole informed me in a face-to-face meeting. When I asked this question recently at another meeting, it was passed to Councillor Jones, who said he would investigate.
Yep.
Despite a reminder, no response has been forthcoming, either from Mark or from yourself, Julie. Could the leader please honestly answer the question now and have this minuted for the public record? That's question 1. Question 2. Whilst wishing Councillor Dorr well in her life post-SCC, and I didn't know whether it was retirement, but you've since said retirement, so I wish you well in that, Julie. I would like to ask whether, on balance, you believe your period as leader will be seen as enhancing the reputation of my city, or will the well-known catalogue of embarrassing failures over the decade overshadow any meagre achievements you may wish to claim? Also, may I reserve a place in the queue, Julie, for a signed copy of your memoir, should you publish such a document? Thirdly, I wonder whether, and this is for you as well, Julie, as a parting gesture, and a positive one, and as a step towards detoxifying the Sheffield Labour brand, you might advise your successor to initiate some sort of meaningful process to uncover the truth around the tree felling scandal. This, in my opinion, could be achieved without loss of face because of the change of leadership, and could be presented as part of a new broom in the council, sweeping away the past and heralding a bright new future for our administration. Finally, fourthly, why yet again does Sheffield lag behind our old rival Leeds in innovative ideas to address the climate emergency? For example, Leeds has initiated the largest plant nursery in the country, capable of growing over 5 million plants for council, public and community use. They are, that forward-looking authority, Leeds, is also planting millions of trees, embarking on educational programmes and other initiatives, and their climate action network sets the gold standard for local authorities. What is my city doing? Is it just a bit of greenwashing at best, or something more profound? Thank you, people.
Right, thank you. So I'm just going through. First of all, to say, Mr. Johnson, as I said to Mr. Slyke, on many occasions you have come into the chamber and been quite polite and courteous, but I also have to say that you have also on occasions come into the chamber doing the exact opposite. So I won't give you, well, I can remember when you occupied the chamber, and that's definitely not being polite and courteous. So in that sense, you did want a response to that. That's your first response. The first question, during the and you must understand this, that during the time of you know, when the campaign against the replacement and replenishment of our street trees started, during that period, which went on for numerous months, an awful lot happened during that period. Is that an indication of you being polite and courteous, Mr. Johnson? Because you're just showing yourself up for being quite childish and petulant. So I'm not answering the question. I think what you'll find is if you would like to write to me and ask further questions, then I'll respond in writing.
Julie,
thank you for being childish and petulant, Mr. Johnson.
I'm neither childish nor I am neither childish nor petulant. I am being seasonal. I'm getting into the season spirit, and I'm expecting from the leader of a major English city a sensible answer to sensible questions. Thank you.
I don't find the person asking the question sensible, therefore I won't answer the questions.
Obfuscation at its worst.
However, Mr. Johnson, I will answer the question about the legacy, because funnily enough, your namesake, Mr. Councillor, Mr. Johnson, asked me a similar questions at the last council meeting. I'm not sure if you were there at that one. I can't remember whether you viewed it. So in response to Mr. Johnson's questions about the legacy, first of all, to say that it's not my legacy of the last 10 years of my tenure, it's our legacy. It's the legacy under my leadership. And the first thing I have to say is our time in office under my leadership coincided with the harshest central government cuts we've ever had to make. So that's the first thing to recognise. But during that time, we sought to give the greatest protection to council services for the people in the greatest need and the most vulnerable in our city. Despite that austerity and the impact that it had, we have done a number of things which made a difference to our city and our citizens. The introduction of the Fairness Commission, paying the living wage and becoming a Living Wage Foundation accredited employer, insourcing a number of services back into the council, including the council housing service, repairs and maintenance, customer services, youth services, and others. The regeneration of the city centre, which is now taking hold, and the council's role in this has been significant in the heart of the city too. We have had projects such as Greater Green and Outdoor City, Greater Green winning awards. We negotiated the retention of World Snooker for a further 10 years and the economic benefit that brings to the city. We developed a major events programme with support for many award-winning national and international events, including the amazing celebration of the 2012 Olympics. Immediately on taking office, we saved our museums and galleries from closure from our predecessors, and I was the first member representing Sheffield on the Arts Council England. We have overseen many award-winning cultural and sporting venues and events. We have built new council housing and invested in our housing and neighbourhoods. We have had investment and management of our parks and our environment, including receiving a number of awards. I personally have planted numerous flowers, bulbs and trees. I have worked with the Women of Steel to create the award-winning statue in Barker's Pool. We have seen the successful development of the Olympic Legacy Park, including Sheffield's first 3 to 19 through school, technical college, the only city with 2 technical colleges, an advanced wellbeing centre, food technology centre, alongside a stadium, a new stadium for rugby and football. We have strengthened the advanced manufacturing in our city, including welcoming the likes of McLaren, Boeing and Rolls-Royce. We have produced a new local plan which protects the green belt from development, despite the level of new house building targets imposed by central government. I have worked with other leaders of the core cities to put devolution more on the agenda, and I've got the South Yorkshire devolution deal done and elected a Labour mayor. As a member of HS2 Task Force and Transport for the North, I have ensured that the route of HS2 brings high-speed rail into our city centre. I was involved in the creation of Transport for the North, the only statutory transport body outside London, and the subsequent investment into our transport network across the North. I have worked collectively and collaboratively with all our partners across the city and region at many levels, including our South Yorkshire leaders, Sheffield City Region, Local Enterprise Partnership, Fairness Commission, Health and Wellbeing Board, Business Advisory Panel, Sheffield Strategic Advisory Group, and most recently, and probably the most emotionally difficult thing that we've done, is to support the city through COVID. My only one disappointment, I have to say, is not seeing Sheffield Wednesday make it to the Premier League. I'll leave that for my successor. So that's our legacy under my tenure. And as anyone will say, there's no I in team, it's teamwork. Thank you. Councillor Mark Jones, would you like to respond to Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Julie. Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson. Sorry for not getting back to you earlier with response to the wrist injury. I have received an answer from officers saying that it is believed that Amy have done all that is needed to do and have indeed done what is legally required of them to do. However, I've not passed that on to you before now, because I'm not sure that there's certain elements of that answer that I understand. So I'm trying to understand what that means in other aspects, that there may be GDPR issues, and I'm not sure who the necessary reporting authority would be on things like RIDDOR and other elements. So my investigations of that are ongoing. They're just not concluded, and I'm not fully confident and satisfied with the answer that I'd be able to provide otherwise. With regards to Leeds, our near neighbour, I am always happy to put one over our noisy neighbour. I think Sheffield does an amazing amount of work, and as Julie rightly highlighted, we are globally recognised for the innovative work done around Greater Green, which will tackle some of the climate change issues that we're already seeing, and every city comes to us as a reference, and this is something we look to build on. With regards to tree planting, I can't take credit for this because obviously Councillor Lee and many others have led on this over many years, over 20 years and so. This city does have approximately 21 to 22% of our area covered by trees. Of 18% of that is within the urban environment, and that's been covered by the iTree survey, which is something that we've now undertaken. I'm sure you're aware the tree strategy that we're doing, which includes now the chapter on street trees that we're bringing forward to push that forward. We'll be planting 10,000 trees per year, and we've got 2 bids in, one successful and one we're awaiting, which will hopefully double that increase in terms of tree numbers that we're planting. It has to be noted that the tree stocks across the nation face many challenges, including diseases and viruses, and we are taking great actions now to address those issues and make sure that the legacy of our tree stocks and the viability of our tree stocks continue into the future. So we will look to see what more we can do on that one. We've also converted 20 hectares of unproductive forest to broadleaf forest to increase the biodiversity, to in somewhat address the challenges of climate change, which we're already receiving, we're already witnessing, and we will continue to push this forward. And in terms of the street tree strategy that we're currently formulating in the working strategy, we hope to become an exemplar for Leeds and others to follow in terms of how we manage our trees. And with the tree wardens that Amy have initiated and are now up and running, we hope to be able to push forward the education elements of that and many other elements. The climate changes that we all face are something that we take very seriously, and it's far from greenwashing that we're doing. We've got a comprehensive study ongoing at the moment that is being undertaken by consultants Arup and Ricardo. They will be reporting via the Green City Partnership Board, a cross-city board that we've established and cross-party board that we've established to ensure that all stakeholders in this city have an opportunity to input into our climate actions. And we will be rolling out a comprehensive programme of education and engagement policies with the greater citizens across our city. I feel that we are carrying forward many elements here. The report that will be going public, as is being finalised now, will indicate significant challenges. We will not shy away from that, and we are determined to stick to our 2030 commitments, and we will look to deliver everything that we can to tackle climate change, because it is happening now. It is something we recognise as being an issue now, and we must tackle for ourselves now and our children and all future generations. So thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark, for a sensible and comprehensive answer. I'm somewhat encouraged by that. And by the way, just a small thing, you mentioned the tree warden system. Just before this meeting, I underwent my training as a tree warden under the new scheme. And very good it was too. So thank you very much, and Christmas wishes to the whole Cabinet and officers present.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. You too.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And as regards my memoirs, I'll send you a signed copy when they are written and ready.
Thank you.
I think that concludes questions today. Yep.
Yes, Chair.
It does. Right, back to the agenda. Okay, right. So item 7, any items called in for scrutiny?
Chair, I can report that there's no new call-ins received, and I can also report the outcome of the call-in of the Cabinet decision on 21st October regarding the Sheffield COVID Business Recovery Plan. That matter was considered at a meeting of the Economic and Environmental Wellbeing Scrutiny on the 24th of November, and they noted the contents of the report and agreed to take no action in relation to the call-in, and requested an update from the Director of City Growth and the Interim Director of the Sheffield Chamber of Commerce at a future meeting in March, April time.
Right, okay, thank you. Any members, and there's any questions regarding the feedback from the call-in? No, good. Item 7, retirement of staff. Need to get to the struggling getting up the pages. Okay, right. Retirement of staff. Can we, members, place on record our appreciation of the services rendered to the council by the members of staff, extend to them our best wishes and a future and long and happy retirement, and direct that an appropriate extract of the resolution is made under the common seal. I do remember that. I'm trying to get to the page where they are. Oh, there we are. So we have 4 members of staff that have served this council for over 20 years, and a couple 40 years and over. So we wish them all the very best. Can we agree that?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, the next item is the, let me get to it. Is item 9, which is the update on the COVID-19 testing and vaccination strategies. It says on the agenda that the report was to follow, but we have received it and had time to peruse, consider it. So can we have, is it Greg that's going to be doing the presentation?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay,
thanks,
Greg, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. I won't do a sort of an epidemiology situation report today. Most Cabinet members have seen that fairly recently. Craig has a set of slides which can be published with the papers, so I won't drone on about the epidemiology because there's a public briefing on Friday, so we'll do that in detail later. So I'll talk about the report, the report per se. It's fairly short, and I won't go through it line by line. I guess section 1 of the report focuses on the strategy and the operational plan. The strategy was set by this cabinet way back in March, probably late February, early March, through threefold. Keep people safe, protect the vulnerable, reopen Sheffield. That has stood the test of time. That still works. It's still the strategy, and I keep recommending there's no real need to change that. The operational plan, which in high level is in the report, again has stood the test of time, and again I'd recommend there's no need to change that. Section 2 and Section 3 are where we are adding to the report, and Section 2 is about the testing strategy. I'll say there is not a coherent national testing strategy. Whilst the World Health Organization are really clear that the one of the answers is testing, they are very clear that that's testing in the context of those who have symptoms. Accordingly, our strategy has been to get testing arrangements available for those who have symptoms to be tested early and first, and that has remained the strategy throughout and will remain the strategy until the end. Paragraph 2.4 essentially sets my recommendation for basically the local testing strategy in the absence of a national strategy. It starts with getting tests for those with symptoms first, then moves into the current area of intense public and media and government interest, using a new test called the lateral flow device in those who don't have symptoms, the asymptomatic population. That is entirely secondary to getting tests for those who've got symptoms with the 6 testing sites that we already have established in Sheffield. So our proposal that's set out in the paper is to target the use of lateral flow device testing in those who don't have symptoms, where we can have most public health benefit or most business continuity benefits. And for the time being, we're focusing on the business continuity benefit there. We don't have the capacity to do what has been done in Liverpool in some other towns, to test the whole of the town. Worth saying that there are 2,000 troops on the street in Liverpool doing that. We don't have those resources, and they're not available to us. So I guess Section 2 of the paper focuses on the testing strategy. Section 3 focuses on the vaccination programme, which is new, as there is one vaccine available to us. The second one will follow. I would be surprised if it's not very early in the new year, and it is no doubt the most important route exit strategy from the COVID crisis that is available to us now. I think it is the government's single most important strategy on COVID is to get us fully vaccinated. Some of the details of the vaccination programme are in the paper, appropriately so. The NHS is the lead body for all of the other things that we vaccinate for, and it's entirely appropriate. The NHS is the lead body. I think it's important not to underestimate the complexity of the logistics that underpin this, and nor is it important. It's also important not to underestimate the time it will take to get a fully vaccinated population. My best guess is at least 4 to 5 months. And there was a really interesting report published by National Audit Office this morning that really got underneath some of the complexities of that. And if people want to view that, it's well worth a read. So the NHS is the lead body for vaccination. We as an organisation are supporting, particularly in 2 areas. The support to logistics. We have some of our officers are incredibly good at logistics and can support the NHS to roll this out as quickly and efficiently as possible. And my personal role in this will be about safety and trust and confidence in the vaccine. Communication, which is the traditional role of DSPH in this space. So that's the kind of the update to the strategy. I think that the story is that this will continue to change. before I get to the recommendations, it's worth me noting that there was a significant change yesterday with regard to the announcement on mass testing in schools that was announced by the Department of Education. That has a significant bearing on the recommendations, and I think we all need to take some time to read exactly what is being proposed by government for testing of both pupils and staff within schools, and work out with government who is going to be resourcing the implementation of it. It has some merit, there's no doubt about that, but the implementation details are not clear. And schools, I think schools will, I find are doing an amazing job around contact tracing, managing risk in schools. It's unfair just to lump this onto schools. So we need to work out how we can best support schools. We may have some roles in that, government may have some roles in that, but given that that announcement was made yesterday, we need to take some time to think that one through and think that one through really quite carefully. So the recommendations are hopefully reasonably straightforward. Yesterday's announcement forced us to rethink basically the batting order of how we arrange our support to the various things that we are being asked to support by government. And my recommendation is that if it's a straight trade-off between supporting mass testing logistically or supporting the logistics of supporting the NHS around the logistics of vaccination, vaccination wins hands down every time. No real questions about that. It is singularly the most important thing that we as a city can do. No doubts there. Second on my batting order would be supporting our work around logistics of vaccination, so logistics of testing for pupils and staff within the school setting. Third, which is where I'm changing even from what was written in the Cabinet report, is third would be the testing to support and enable business critical staff, the paragraph 2.8 at 2.8. And we need to be really clear that the situation on the resourcing for that has changed since I wrote this paper. The situation on resourcing has become less clear from government, not more clear. So we need to be really careful about not committing to things that we can't adequately resource. And lastly, I'm very clearly recommending that we don't enter into whole population, whole town testing until we're very clear on the resourcing and the logistics of that, and the question of does it make a difference to population transmission, which the science tells us at the moment we don't know. Those are the slight rearrangement of the recommendations that are in the Cabinet paper on account of the changing resourcing, changing in the situation on the resourcing, which has become less clear, and yesterday's announcement on mass testing in school settings.
Yeah, thank you for that, Greg. I'm actually going through the recommendations as you speak, and I don't think I'll wait to see if any other members have got questions or comments, but I don't see that we need to change any of the recommendations based on what you've said, because it's been quite clear in the recommendation number 3, bullet point 3, is to agree an approach to identifying cohorts for asymptomatic targeted testing based on a clear rationale. And what you've just said is the rationale behind testing pupils is still to be worked up in regards to all the things that you've said subsequently about the significant resource implications, which is also part of so I don't think we need to change the recommendations. It's just
the context around them did shift.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. So any questions from members? I'm looking around. I can't. Jackie.
Thank you very much, Julie, and thanks, Greg. I suppose a question that I've got, which you've quite rightly, Greg, mentioned that it's the NHS that is doing the vaccine rollout, but you've stated that we will be supporting, doing anything we can. Of course we would, wouldn't we? And you as the public health, especially around the comms about the trust in the vaccine. And I was just listening to the news the other day, I think it was yesterday, about they'd done some research into the distrust and the amount of people. They looked at the white population and population of BAME, and there were more people in the BAME population who were distrustful of having one. And I suppose we know that we've done extremely well with our contact tracing down to our localities. And I suppose I know it's the NHS, but I think there's something about using those links to our communities, using those links out there, using the already very good comms, I think, that we give out, that we get out this and we make sure that's one element. Because I suppose for me, what we're saying here is, and what we've always said, if you've got symptoms, please go and get tested. If you get tested and you're positive, please isolate and let us know who you've been in contact with. And then vaccine is the next one, isn't it? That's going to save us all going forward. So whilst we're doing all that stuff, as well as washing your hands and everything, I suppose it's a question is there anything, I know you said there's no funding, but I wondered if the NHS or through that route, there's any funding for those routes into the community to ensure that they can get into the community.
So I agree with everything you've said, Councillor Drain. I think in terms of the funding, it would be the subject of the next paper, but I think that the government have made a significant amount of funding available to this and other cities. So we will use that according to the priorities we've set out in the outbreak control plan as it is, and we'll add a section in the outbreak control plan on vaccination. And I think we've got the right networks and the right mechanisms to directly get into the communities where there is a lack of trust in authority and a lack of trust in vaccination. I hear lots of really interesting theories about what the vaccine can and can't do, and most of them are, well, no, they're all false, to be blunt, but they do need to be dispelled. So I think we have the right mechanisms and we've got the right arrangements in place to enable us to do that.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't talking about the money we've got as a local authority. I wondered if the NHS, as part of their grant or money funding they've been given to carry out the vaccination process, have got any part of that money for community and getting that message out. That's all. Just wondered that.
I don't
we need to make sure we're working with them, don't we?
Oh, we are. Yeah, we are very closely. I don't think so. There is funded national work on comms, but I don't think that the Department of Health nor NHS England have made funding available for detailed work within communities.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a public health responsibility, isn't it? And we have public health because it's sort of like any other vaccination or screening programme. The NHS do it, but we're the ones to ensure the health of the public. Any other?
I asked the Director of Finance. I asked the Director of Finance at the CCG that question this morning, and she confirmed that they haven't really been given that. The NHS are doing it nationally, and they haven't got anything specific, particularly. No.
Yeah, and it's something that we will discuss at the Prevention and Management Board regarding how we, because it's another stage, isn't it? That the part of the communications around hygiene, what to do and also what not to do, and then also around if you have symptoms, get a test and everything you've said. We've had all those discussions at the Prevention and Management Board, and I think the people on that board and the reason why they are there is because they are very well connected into those communities that we identified as that sometimes it's quite hard to reach, and then this is the next stage where how do we get the messages out there that this vaccine is safe, it's reliable, and it's critical that you have it. One of the most recent ones was the two most recent ones I read. One is it contains animal products, so there was people concerned about halal in it, and it's clear that it doesn't contain any animal products. But just the fact that that's out there, that some people will believe it, And then the other big one was when Matt Hancock made that announcement about this new strain, because as I've always said, our benchmark is the people that we come into regular contact with. And the first thing my dad said to me, who was due for the vaccine tomorrow, actually, his 86-year-old, and his appointment tomorrow was, well, what's the point if there's a new strain? Will I be protected against that? And I went, yes, Dad, yes, you do need to get it. And it's sort of, if people are, that announcement about that new strain, I think hopefully it won't have done too much damage, but it will have raised questions in people's minds. Shall I wait until they've sorted that out and then go for the vaccine? It's just beyond ridiculous that the Secretary of State for Health would think it's appropriate to make announcements like that. But anyway, there we are. Any other questions? Okay, so on the recommendations, as I say, that there's no, in light of what Greg's reported, an update, there's no reason to change the recommendations. So on all those recommendations on page 2 of the report, can we, page 1 and page 2, can we agree all those recommendations?
Agreed,
Chair.
Agreed, Chair.
And thank you again.
Thank you.
It's never ending, Greg, is it? You feel like you get through, you jump over 100 hurdles and then there's another 100 and they seem bigger and wider. So well done for the persistence and continuing to make it understandable for us especially, and the public. Okay, so the next report is the grant approval one that Greg referred to, so that's item 10. Can we take that one, please?
So I won't really introduce this. I'll hand this over to Keith, who's done the hard work on this one.
Yep, thanks. Thank you, Keith.
Hi, thanks everyone. So in the Cabinet in September, the decision was approved for the funding that was available at the time for outbreak management and ongoing public health costs, and the investment plan of how that funding was intended to be used. Since that Cabinet report in September, further funding has been announced by the DHSC, and that's known as the Contained Outbreak Management Fund, or COMEF grant, as we've been calling it. So as has kind of been mentioned, the COVID-19 response is fast moving. Funding announcements can be sudden. This funding recognises the ongoing public health and outbreak management costs of tackling COVID-19. To date, the council's received just over £8 million of the COMEF grant, and it also expects to receive just over £7 million of the COMEF grant through January to March 2021, taking the total amount of the grant up to 15 million, just over £15 million. The report seeks the approvals and delegations to continue this work. In this case, substantial amount of the funding has already been received, and there's a need to sort of approve its receipt and arrange its allocation urgently. So that's the purpose of the report and the recommendations included in it.
Great, thank you very much, Keith. Have we got any questions on the scanning across? I can't see any questions, and we have discussed this, and this is the formality, isn't it, of accepting the grants for their specific allocation. So can we agree those recommendations, therefore, which is to note that we've received some, approve the acceptance and so on, and then the delegations accordingly? Can we agree those?
Yes, Chair. Agreed, Chair.
Agree those recommendations.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you both, Keith and Greg. Greg, for that. Right. So the next item is item 11, which is the capital approvals for month 7.
Hello, yes, I'm Jamie Watkinson, Finance Manager for the Capital team, just presenting this item. So the recommendations are to approve the variations to the capital programme as set out and delegate the award of any contracts subsequently to the Director of Financial and Commercial Services. And we have got a couple of grants for acceptance as well within these papers. So if I quickly take you through the changes to the schemes, the M1 Gateway Art project, unfortunately, is slipping. That's been due to COVID reasons and trying to raise the additional funds required to do that. So that's going to move on past when hopefully the main peak of the pandemic's passed. We can look again at moving some resources into delivering that programme. So the budget for that so far is slipping into next year. Approval for Greater Green 2 moving into a second phase on Angel Street as ERDF funding became available to deliver that. So the Greater Green project that completed will now stretch up into Angel Street, delivering some more improvements to sustainable travel and some more planting on there. We've got some feasibility work done for some road safety at Halfway for a crossing point there. And also we are looking now with grant funding from government to purchase electric taxis to deliver a taxi trial system so that we can encourage Hackney carriage users to maybe convert to electric. So we'll buy up to 11 taxis, which will then go on a rotating 2-week loan system. We're adding in under transport as well, 85k into the Streets Ahead Opportunities budget, which is to give money to do small improvements that are requested by individuals around their area. We are also replacing the equipment at Millhouses Playground at £14,000, which have been damaged recently, and also delivering some improvements to Arbourthorne Pond to improve access around the pond, and also to provide facilities for storage so it can be used again as a key local destination for fishing. We're accepting some funding from Homes England to deliver the project which we've already on with, which is the modern method of construction, new council housing at Nutton Crescent. Just to note that we're now getting some additional Homes England funding for that, which will reduce the amount of our own resources we have to put into that. We're spending 437,000 purchasing the leasehold on some, the freehold on some leasehold properties that are in our council housing estate. So for that investment, we will get properties that have a value of approximately £2.27 million, and it will make sure they don't revert to the current freeholder when those leases expire. We're investing 31,000 at Collegiate Crescent to convert an existing office into a flat, which will then give us 4 flats to be used as temporary accommodation to reduce reliance on B&Bs where we need to provide interim accommodation for people. The roofing replacement programme in the housing investment programme, unfortunately that has slipped. So we were hoping to get £3.8 million worth of investment in this year. That's not going to happen now. Again, due to COVID, delayed the tender process, and it's delayed us getting on site. So that funding is going to slip into next year. Under people, capital and growth, we are investing 135k into Clifford All Saints Primary. This was formerly the Ecclesall Junior site. When it transferred over to the diocese, we did retain some responsibilities on some of the structural aspects of that building, and this is us just making good on those commitments. We're also doing more boiler work at Whiteways Primary School, just in the feasibility at the moment on the best solution there to bring their heating system up to scratch. We're replacing the automatic doors at the Winter Gardens, now 20 years old, and replacing with something that needs less maintenance and provides less trap hazards. We're also investing in our medico-legal centre that needed some work on its hot water system to prevent some leaks we've been getting. And Westfield Youth Club community building, the roof needs replacing there, and so there's 50k being invested into that. So the grants that we're wanting to accept are £10,000 from the Environment Agency towards the Arbourthorne Pond scheme, and £200,000 from Homes England towards the Nutton Crescent new construction council housing schemes. And again, I've whipped through that very quickly, as I always do, but hoping that you've had a chance to read it as well. But if you have any questions on any of those items.
Julie?
Yep, thank you. I've got Paul Wood indicating first. So Paul.
Yeah, I'd just like to pass two comments on this, because a lot of words have been used about legacy this morning. And if there's one legacy that I would be exceedingly proud of you, Julie, as leader, is the work that you've allowed Councillor Johnson and myself to do on our social house building programme. Sheffield has the largest development of social housing anywhere in the country outside of London. Sorry, my voice is going, but with our partners, we shall be building around 5,000 homes over the next 8 years, which will be the first time in the history of the city for a long time that we will see an increase in our social housing properties after the right to buys estimations are in. It's a major achievement. It's applauded in national magazines of the building firms across the country. It is. And the second thing I just want to mention is the roofing contract. Although the delay has caused problems with not being delivered this year, we've been able to reassess those contracts we give out so that in future, all those contracts will have built into them the fact that we will employ local Sheffield people, and they won't win contracts if we don't get local Sheffield employment into them. That roofing contract has around 70 full-time jobs and 8 further apprenticeships to a massively increased apprenticeship scheme that you've supported me in moving forward this year. So I think there's some fantastic legacy achievements that come within those two announcements. And I'd like to thank Councillor Johnson, because he led on the MMC project completely, and hopefully that will help us deliver all our targets a lot quicker moving into the future. So I just thought it needed to be put on record what a fantastic support you've given me to get those housing numbers in place. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Two of my greatest passions, social housing and apprenticeships. So thank you for that. Mary?
Yeah, I just want to make just a comment about Arbourthorne and Millhouses Park. They're very small projects, but very, very welcome. And I know Councillor Ben Biscoe has driven the Arbourthorne Ponds project personally. And again, if you're in your patch, Julie, and you've had a great legacy there as well. Norfolk Park is looking stunning, and a lot of that is down to you. So not a citywide project, but a local thing. So just wanted to mention those as well. And also the Gateway project, a great piece of artwork that we fully intend to deliver in the future. Once this pandemic is over, we can get back to work.
Right, thank you. Mark?
Thank you, Julie. I'd like to echo Mary's comments on the Arbourthorne elements of the pond. It must be noted that where we are looking to maintain and enhance our biodiversity, this isn't done on its own, and simply letting assets stand and develop as they would otherwise is not sufficient. So this intervention shows that the welcome attention to this site is really, really appreciated. It will enhance our environment, it will enhance our legacy for our children, and I think it is a great reflection on you, Julie, and your tenure in this position. But also another great reflection, and we've commented on it twice already, is the Greater Green Scheme, the improvements that will be undertaken at Angel Street. I'm looking forward to cycling through these new enhancements, this new beautiful public realm that we'll be delivering. And more than anything, the Greater Green itself is genuinely nationally recommended and recognised as being outstanding, and it's also internationally recognised. And on the back of that, we will be building in other innovative bids to hopefully bring further flood defence and public realm enhancements to the city. And it's only because we've delivered these schemes like Greater Green and they've been so successful. And I'm probably getting in before Councillor Johnson here on this one and saying that I'm really, really pleased to see the electric taxes are still going to be delivered and that we can bring them forward and we can enhance that, because that transition from petrochemical vehicles into electric vehicles will, one, give us an environmental gain in terms of the cleaner air that we'll have, but also will help us tackle the climate change crisis that we are currently dealing with. So there's lots to be recommended and welcome from in here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Terry?
Thanks, Chair. Mine's just to kind of reiterate on the overall projects that we keep bringing forward. I know this is month 7, but it has to be said that obviously Mark's just highlighted the Greater Green Scheme. I mean that just highlights again under your tenure the amount of cabinet members that we've had through this city that's brought the money into the city to deliver these great schemes. But overall, what it does show is that what we're delivering on is our commitments to the people of Sheffield, and we continually to do that. We've done that again with the crossing at halfway, which we promised, and a number of great schemes across the board that we're continually delivering. And I think under this scenario, Chair, under your stewardship as well, is just saying that those commitments are continually to be met. I just know that on the Greater Green Scheme, we had Oliver Letwin, if you remember, round when we took him around from Attercliffe to Wicker Arches, to the back of the new Home Office buildings, and we're able to get about 60 to 80 million quid out of him in the process. So I just like to say that obviously, with all the great achievements you've kind of rolled off at the beginning of the meeting, what ought to be had is the amount of money that you've also assisted in bringing in this city to deliver these schemes. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Terry, and I absolutely mean it. Throughout the 10 years, every single cabinet member that's been involved along the way, and it's for years to go. And also, we have seen off quite a lot of ministers, haven't we? I think we've seen off 3 prime ministers, or have we? Anyway, we've seen off during the last 10 years. We've seen off quite a few secretaries of state, prime ministers, and ministers, and you're still here. So great, well done. Any other questions? No, great. So can we agree the recommendations of the Cabinet report, which is any variations and any additions to the capital programme?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Back to the agenda, we have Stocksbridge Town Fund.
Hi, I'm Tammy Whitaker, Head of Regeneration and Property Services. I won't run through the report in detail, but just highlight the main points. Essentially, in September 2019, Stocksbridge was one of the 100 towns invited to bid for Towns Deal funding by the government. We, in the springtime, we submitted what's called a readiness checklist, and there as the first part of the process in securing the funding. The second part of that process is to submit what's called a Towns Investment Plan, and the report is requesting delegated authority to submit that Towns Investment Plan to government at the end of January. The timing of this is kind of quite tight, and the bid has to be ready and approved by the Towns Fund Board for the middle of January for submission on the 29th of January, hence the reason we're bringing it this month. The Towns Deal funding has a focus around urban regeneration, skills and enterprise development and connectivity, and essentially up to £25 million worth of funding is available from government to be invested into Stocksbridge. A Towns Deal board has been brought together of public, private and third sector interests to steer development of the town's investment plan, and they've worked up a vision around making sure that local people benefit from the funding, around leaving a legacy for the town of Stocksbridge, around health and well-being, skills and environmentally sustainable improvements to the town. over what was rather quite a challenging period for consultation, and a consultation exercise was undertaken in October and November and received an overwhelming response of over 600 people about what they would like to see the money used for and spent on within the town. And that came up with a broad range of priorities about creating a vibrant town, about strengthening and diversifying the economy to recover from the current pandemic, about increasing the learning and skills availability, particularly for post-16 learning in Stocksbridge, about making the town more accessible and connecting it into the wider area and to Sheffield and further afield, about first-class sports, leisure, health and wellbeing facilities, and about sustainable and clean growth. And really around talking about the subject we've just been talking about, Greater Green, about enhancing the appearance and environment of Manchester Road, and kind of regenerating the high street within Stocksbridge. The projects haven't yet been finalised, but they're likely to include a regeneration of the high street focusing on council-owned land of the library and developing a fit-for-purpose modern library and community facility. Public realm, building on the great work that we've done in other parts of the city and Greater Green, and connections through to Fox Valley. The topography of Stocksbridge makes it quite difficult to get around, and so it's important that we have an easy link through to Fox Valley and better transport links around the city through a community bus. Post-16 education, enhancement improvements to the leisure and sports facilities, including a multi-use sports pitch, enhancement to Oxley Park, and the subject of a previous cabinet decision around £500,000 of funding going into improvements at the leisure centre. The other area for development is around increasing the visitor economy and links into cycling and walking trails and out into the Peak District, which is really the kind of unique selling point for Stocksbridge, and building on that kind of ability to get into the great outdoors, really, which has been so important for people during this current period of time. So the Towns Deal Board is in the stages of working up the town's investment plan, which will go into some of the detail of the projects. Once MHCLG have approved the town's investment plan, there'll then be a second phase where the projects are worked up in detail, and they'll be subject to further council approval and consideration.
Great, thanks, Tammy. Gone through it. Any questions or comments? I mean, I think it's not only is it in the report, I think Tammy's just comprehensively gone through all aspects of the fund itself. It's always great to receive money into Sheffield, isn't it? And certainly Stocksbridge High Street in particular and areas around there do need, desperately need that investment that we've been funnily enough asking for the last 10 years over austerity. And you know, this government take, what was it, 400, nearly £500 million out of Sheffield in government local government cuts alone, never mind all the cuts to welfare and other public services, and then throw a miserly 25 million quid back at us. But anyway, it's all welcome. Mary?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you're saying, Chair, on that one. But I think, you know, if you look at what people have said just in this meeting about what's happened in the city centre and how we can deliver massive projects, I think it's down to hard work. You know, give us the money and we'll do the work and we'll make it successful. And I think that's what we intend to do. As Tammy mentioned, you know, the Oxley Park project, was a lot of work went into that for a couple of years before we got that grant, and everybody will focus their attention now on and making sure that this project is a success. And like you said, it's a small amount of money in the grand scheme of things, but we'll make the absolute most of it because we're used to doing that one in Sheffield and making it a success.
Any other questions? Jackie?
Mine was just a comment really, Chair, just to say, I just think I used to go out to Stocksbridge sometimes because just went out that way, and I thought that the high street was looking very dilapidated since Fox Valley had been built and everything. So it's great that the high street is now going to be improved, and I'm sure Mary will have mentioned the library, was pleased to see the library there and the work that's been done to make sure we improve the library at the heart of the community, and that link to Fox Valley as well, which is vital. I just echo everything you've said, Chair and Mary. It's a pity we've had so much money taken out of our budgets, because otherwise this could have maybe been started a long time ago. But I think that with this and the 500k to the leisure centre, for all those people that I know, all those still the volunteers that run out there, and I know that local members certainly have been involved in the Oxley Park as well, getting information, getting consultation and getting ideas back from the community. I was very impressed the fact that 3% of people did reply to the consultation, although it's identified that there weren't so many under 35s, and you'll be looking to the board will be looking to get their views in the near future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jackie. Any Mark?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Julie. Thanks for the report, Tammy. And I'm really struck by the fact that on the back of European Union legacy funding that we were able to secure through this council and others, that we were able to deliver Fox Valley, and now we're building on top of that. I do think that it's only appropriate that, due to the chaotic and incompetent behaviour of this government in delivering the Brexit deal that they said would be so easy, that we keep the pressure on government for them to, one, rectify the billions of pounds that they've stripped off Sheffield over the last 10 years, but also to fill that void of funding that we had previously accessed from the European Union. It's incumbent on this government and Boris Johnson, who drove this agenda, to make sure he delivers on that. So anything we can do to keep the pressure on them and keep the money coming to us so that we can deliver the great work for Sheffield, and in this particular instance, Stocksbridge, that would be very much welcome. So thank you, Tammy.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. You've just reminded me about that. I'd forgotten the amount of funding that had actually gone into Fox Valley of European funding, because I remember right back at the inception of I forgot about Fox Valley. I'll have to add it to the legacy. have to add it to the legacy, because I do remember right at those discussions with Mark Dransfield Properties on the initial discussions around the design and everything around Fox Valley, and it was the council actually, and he gives us credit publicly for this, in securing that European funding for him to enable him to deliver the wonderful Fox Valley that we now see and love. Because I do particularly like to go over to Fox Valley and do a bit of shopping there. So it is because of the council's contributions and hard work to work with a private sector partner in delivering that, and the European money that actually went in it. And you're right, we've yet to hear about the shared prosperity fund, haven't we, and how that's going to be distributed around the country. So anyway, thank you, Tammy, for that. I mean, it's a great plan, and hopefully we can build on it, because you know, things emerge over time, don't they? And plans take time to realise over time, plans as big as this. So other things will emerge along the way, and hopefully whatever does, it's only to improve and enhance what's already there. So thank you for that. Can we then therefore basically just agree the recommendation to submit the Stocksbridge Town Investment Plan to secure that funding?
Agreed.
Agreed.
I hope you all look forward to spending it. Agreed. Thank you very much. Right, get my next item on the agenda. Item 13, Special Educational Needs Disabilities Ombudsman Report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to just preface the item just with a few words from me. I'm Andrew Jones, and I'm the Director of Education and Skills in the Council. And then I'm just going to invite my colleague Tim Armstrong, who is the Head of SEN in my team, just to highlight some key points within it. The first thing is to say is that clearly this is a very critical report, and I want to make it clear that on behalf of the Council, we accept all the recommendations within the report from the Ombudsman, and we have already begun the process of implementing some of those recommendations, and we will, as quickly as we can, implement all the recommendations in full. I'm newly appointed, but nevertheless, I firmly believe that, you know, as officers, we are accountable for the decisions that our predecessors have taken, and obviously we do take responsibility for that. In particular, I just need to make it clear that the decisions that actually have led to this report were taken by officers who no longer are with the council. But nevertheless, the decisions that were originally taken with the response that some officers subsequently then took has compounded some of those issues. And for that, we've issued a very sincere apology to the parent who's raised this issue with the Ombudsman, and also with the young person who is also affected by this. It's entirely regrettable, and I fully intend to make sure that it doesn't occur again. With that, I'm just going to ask Tim just to go through some of the highlights of the report, please.
Yeah, so Tim Armstrong, head of SEND. The case that we're talking about stretches back to 2014, when the young man was in one of our local special schools that wasn't working, and a decision was made from that time onwards to place him with an unregistered and unregulated alternative provision provider, who was actually a care provider, and for some reason somebody engaged them in terms of a bespoke educational provision. Over time, and I think where we're up to now, is that provision was put in place. It wasn't good, it wasn't effective, it wasn't quality first teaching and learning, and it shouldn't have happened, and we would not and are no longer and would no longer commission that provider to deliver that provision. The young man is now in an independent special school in the local area. Unfortunately, because that special school is not on what's called list 41, which is a list that we can direct, we weren't able to direct the school to admit, so we had to wait quite some time for a place to be available. Their method of delivery is a individual room for the young person to be able to access their learning from. So quite a bespoke approach for children with quite demand level avoidance. And they had to wait for another child to move out of the provision. And so that exasperated it once it was identified that that was an appropriate placement, because we had no alternative, and that was the parental preference. It then did take some time for him to actually firmly be within that provision and in place. And so as Andrew said, that was regrettable, it's wrong. We should have been able to put the right provision in place. And one of our broader pieces of work that's ongoing is ensuring that we have the right commissioned educational provision for children with special educational needs in the city, which my colleagues across in commissioning are working on. The recommendations for from the Ombudsman were that an apology needed to be issued to the young man and his parents, which has been done, for a range of compensation to be issued to the young man from his loss of education and to his parents in terms of the impact on them. And that has been made and is with the parent, and we've got confirmation of that. There was then two other areas of recommendation. One is in regards to where the parent has raised concerns that with the Ombudsman that there were areas of unidentified needs still within the education healthcare plan. And so the Ombudsman requested that our educational psychologists work with the school to establish any unidentified areas of need and ensure that those are then written into the plan. A very experienced educational psychologist who actually used to work in this independent special school that he's now placed at, so was aware of the cohort and has the experience to work with that cohort, has been working with the school and with the family, and an annual review will be held in January to make any recommendations as to changes to the EHC plan based on that. And then the final part was in regard to ensuring that it can't happen again in terms of provision. So there was a number of recommendations around alternative provision. And what we're talking about here just to be a little bit technical, is alternative provision for children where a mainstream school need to use an alternative due to behavioural issues or needs, is how it's defined by government guidance. AP alternative provision can be defined 3 ways. One is for children who are medically not fit to go to school, able to go to school because of their health needs. One is for children who are permanently excluded from a school, and then the third is where a school arranges that alternative provision, and it's that area we're talking about here. So they asked that we review all of that provision and identify and report back to the relevant committees, which is yourself here, about our plan to address that, to ensure that EHC plans will not name a non-educational provider in this way again, that any inadequate alternative provision is addressed, and any alternative provision that's not subject to a contract or commissioned within the council's agreed procedures are addressed. And so you'll see in the report that what we've been doing is building on a piece of work done over the past year, and a review conducted into alternative provision to ensure that we can address those recommendations. We already had a planned updated alternative provision framework, which will focus on quality and curriculum and ensuring those appropriate checks are in place. Obviously, the provider that was procured for the young man was not on that framework, and that was part of the issue that should never have happened. So what will happen is that we have already reviewed our EHC plans to ensure that we aren't directly naming in section I, which is the placement, any alternative provision that's not appropriate. As part of that review, we will ensure that schools are advised that they should only utilise alternative provision on the framework for any child with an education and healthcare plan, and that the local authority would not be in support of any provision beyond that steps outside of that, unless it's directly delivered by the school, i.e. it's on the school roll. The difference being rather than with a separate provider. And we'll continue to work to ensure that we've got a framework of alternative provision in the city that's fit for purpose. Ultimately, we will not commission from that provider again. We don't want this to ever happen again, and we're committed to making sure that we continue to drive forward improvement around SEND. We know it's a challenging area. We know that we have substantial issues within the city to address, and are continuing to do that, working across the board, including in terms of what our appropriate commissioned services are for specialist support, as well as our specialist placements. So again, we'd like to apologise to the family and most importantly to G for the errors that have taken place in this case.
Right, thank you both, Andrew and Tim. I'm going to take other questions because I've just got a couple of questions myself, but has anyone else got any particular questions? Abby?
It's more of a comment rather than a question, Chair.
Okay.
So I think it was really disappointing, the experience that the family had to go through, and in particular the child. And I think one of the learning experiences from this is, we fully apologise as an authority for what has been experienced, but making sure that this doesn't happen again. And I think in that learning curve, we really need to take the lessons from what's happened here, and make sure that that those actions are followed through. And I think in particular in relation to alternative provision, this is a key area because schools can also contract alternative providers directly without the local authority. So we need to get the mechanisms stronger and more effective. And the review that we started last year was the starting point in this. So we started to look at the providers that we've got across the city, the types of services that they offer, and the quality of service that they have to offer as well. So I think building on that piece of work, we need to make sure that these providers are regulated and that the quality is of high quality as well, because these are our young people that we need to ensure don't fall through the net. So like Andrew and Tim, I sincerely apologise to the family for the experience that they've had to go through. But for me, the biggest thing is how do we make sure that this never happens again? Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, Abby. Jackie?
Yeah. Well, I think anybody who reads the Ombudsman report, it makes difficult reading, to be honest. It does make difficult reading, and it completely unacceptable. And I feel really personally upset about this and apologise completely to the young man and his mum and his family who've had to go through all of this to get somebody to listen, basically. The question I want to ask is, I thought we had a framework for AP many years ago. We had a list of providers that went through our criteria to make sure they had all the things. So, and as Councillor Mohammed has said, that didn't mean that wasn't that schools could go outside that list and take other providers. But why on earth? I know we're not going back and thinking, you know, you said quite at the beginning, Andrew, that, you know, it happened and the people are gone and everything, but I don't understand. We know schools can go outside our list when we had our list before, but why would an officer go outside our list? That's what I don't understand. And the other point, just a question, I will come back and ask the questions, not tonight, not now for answers now, but I do want to have a more detailed briefing on it, because I also think something else has been raised here. It's about the provision that we have in our city, but not just in our city, but outside of the city. And I think the point was raised that the provision for this young man was not there. And that's my question. Is that what we're saying? And so, yes, we've got to learn from this. I agree and support totally what Councillor Mohammed said. We always learn from anything, whether we do a serious case review or whatever. We must learn, and we must look, and if it means changing the way we work and changing our policies and practices, we must do that. But is this a fundamental issue for us? And is it something we might need to invest in capital? And I know we are investing in capital for more special educational need provision, but is this so specialist? Do we need to widen that to ensure there are places for young people, even if they're only a handful of young people, but we do have a place for them in our city, really? And that's the question. Is it, you know, are the things, there were things we'll do, there things will change, the things we do, but are there other things, bigger things that we need to embark on as well? That's my question. Thank you, Chair.
I'll give you the opportunity to attempt to answer that question, because I think it's not I personally wouldn't find it easy to just answer the question in a simple manner. I think it's more to do with actually reviewing the framework and the policies and procedures that we've got in place right now and how they compare with what we had before, because of course they would be a vast improvement on what we've had before. So if you want to try and attempt to just answer the question about in-city provision, because I think, you know, I mean, I would personally have wanted to, let's say, challenge and interrogate and myself personally review the new framework myself, if I continue to be the leader, because this is something I'd want to pick up, because I think it's really important. I've got my own personal experiences of it, and one of the issues that I do have is that this has come to light, and my only, like Councillor Mohammed said, it's to make sure it never happens again, but it's probably there are other people in the city that have had not necessarily exactly the same experience, but some sort of let's say unacceptable experiences in the way that we've managed to support and educate people with special educational needs, and the introduction of the education and healthcare plans was not sort of introduced in the best way possible, and I certainly think it's something that Councillor Drayton should probably sit down along with Councillor Mohammed to consider how we continue to monitor this, to make sure that we are addressing all the issues that have been identified, but also in general the education and support that we give to children and young people with special educational needs. Alternative providers was the question.
So if I can just, I'll answer part of it and then just ask Tim to come in terms of Sheffield provision. And Jackie, Councillor Dredger, I think you're asking a rhetorical question in terms of why did that initial decision occur? But it is at the nub of the issue, which is the framework has been in place for a number of years. I mean, I've just been appointed in the council recently, but I was here 10 years ago and the framework was here 10 years ago. So yeah, it's not a new framework and it's been around for a long time. It does need some improvements to it, but nevertheless, that framework has been there for some time. And the decision to actually circumnavigate that framework and actually to use alternative provision not on that framework is at the heart of this issue, and is the very decision that's actually caused that. So, and that is emphatically what we will never repeat. We will never repeat where a council officer actually makes a decision or makes a recommendation to use alternative provision outside of that framework. What we want to do is to improve the framework, as Councillor Mohammed has explained, in order to make it more comprehensive, more fit for purpose than it already is. In relation to the type of provision in the city, Tim, would you just be able to answer in terms of any view, obviously in relation to this young person in particular, but the adequacy of provision in the city for this young person and more broadly?
So I think, and I would reflect exactly the same point that Andrew made about the AP framework. Within the city, we do have, across from our commissioning colleagues now, a sufficiency plan for our specialist provision. We know that not just in Sheffield, but nationally, the growth in demand for specialist provision has risen exponentially since the introduction of the Children and Families Act in 2014. But specifically in terms of making sure that we've got the right type of provision and the right expertise in our schools, one of the challenges that we faced is, as our special schools in particular have become fuller, and some of that is as our parents and as our young people and as our primary schools in particular have struggled to see a route for children into secondary education with additional needs because of the curriculum challenges. We've seen that those schools have struggled to be able to meet the needs of the most complex sometimes. And that's because they're dealing with the needs of a lot more kids than they would have done previously. What we are doing and have done through work over the past few years is look towards how we commission the right provision whilst also supporting in more of our mainstream children to be able to have their needs met close to home. Because we want ideally children to be included within the mainstream sector as far as possible, to be able to not have to travel across the city for their education, and to be able to be alongside peers who don't have SEND. And there's an advantage for children who don't have SEND to be alongside children who do have special needs. And that's a really important part of what we should be thinking about as a city. What we have got is we have 2 new special free schools opening. All new free schools, all new special schools now have to be free schools under the government's guidance. Unfortunately, there have been delays to those. It's not Sheffield officers who are managing the builds of that. That's actually been managed through the DFE. But they will meet certain elements of criteria. And actually, for the young man that we're talking about, that would have been our starting point. One of the first one of those would have been our starting point. What we are doing is working with our DFE colleagues and working within the council and specifically with our special schools to look and say, how do we ensure that we're really clear on what cohort of children goes to which school? So I was doing a piece of work last week and through this week around those new schools to make sure we've got it right, so that when we set those schools up, they're not set up to meet a need and we miss a cohort that we need to address. We also do need to continue to work with the independent sector. So there will be always a small number of young people who we need to work with locally because we don't have the capacity and space or appropriate provision within the school estate within Sheffield. But we'd like to, realistically, we'd like to reduce that more so that we've got more opportunity to make sure that we've got the plan in place. And colleagues are working and looking to work across South Yorkshire in terms of that planning to say well, if we've got specific areas, how might we meet those? So there are some young people who are incredibly complicated, require 52-week provision, round the clock, 2-to-1 care, all those sorts of type things, that actually we are better to go to the independent sector sometimes and say, how do we make sure this works? But we need a better deal and a better working relationship with that sector to make sure that it's actually providing as high a quality provision as we would expect for the young people that we're talking about. We are not there yet. We absolutely are not there yet. We have massive challenges in terms of capacity in our specialist estate, and it is a real concern for us, and an area that's been raised at People Services PLT level. But we are committed to saying we need to make sure that our schools are clear on the cohort that they need to meet, and that we look across the wealth of provision as early as possible. We know that there are far too many young people who've had bad experience of their educational support because of their SEND, but we need to make sure that at every stage we've got the right level of support to ensure that the schools have got the right skills, resource, curriculum and provision in place.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask one more question? I remembered one of the things in the Ombudsman report was the educational psychology needs of this young man. And I think there's something about working with our health colleagues as well, because I would think that a lot of our children with SEND do need that extra support around, that whole emotional and health element. So I think, and I know we are working closely with health at the moment through the inclusion board, but this highlights that need as well, doesn't it? And that need, that support that's needed in schools as well. And we need to make sure and ensure that's there by working with our health colleagues, I presume.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, that's why I was fully supportive of the introduction of education and healthcare plans, because they're so interdependent that you can't address one without the other. I just wish every single child and young person in Sheffield had an EHC plan, because I think they're all very different and they've all got very different needs. And I think one of the issues that we have is not necessarily the SEN schools. I think one of the issues we have is mainstream schools, and how mainstream schools adapt and adjust in order to integrate people with young people and children with additional needs into their schools. And I still think that's a big problem. And I fully understand why parents, particularly and especially when they're going on to comprehensive school, get quite concerned and worried about where the child goes beyond primary school. Because in a small mainstream primary school, at least you get that sort of pastoral support, and it's a smaller school and everything. And then as they go up to the big school, parents with children with additional needs, let's say, are really quite fearful of their children going and getting drowned in that big school, and especially if it's a mainstream school. And we all know some of the schools. I could share experiences with how some of those schools have responded to accepting pupils with SEN into their schools or not. And I think there's a lot of work to do with mainstream schools, but unfortunately they're all academies as well and free schools, and it complicates it all. So, you know, if I had to leave one legacy, it would be bring back the local education authority. However, not up to me, I'm afraid. So, but I also want to offer my unreserved apology, because, you know, it was during 2014 to 2019. And I'm reassured, I have to say, particularly from Andrew and Tim, that we've now carried out a review. We've got the framework in place, the policies and procedures, and then the training and expertise and knowledge within the workforce enabled to exercise those policies and procedures, because they're great having policies and procedures, but the workforce needs to understand them and how to implement them and adhere to them as well. So I'm reassured, and I'm also reassured that Councillor Mohammed will be, monitoring and managing with yourselves this very, very important and critical issue. So can we accept all the recommendations of the report, and we look forward to the implementation of all those vastly improved practices and procedures that will take place. Thank you. Okay.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Right, next, final item 14, procurement of a vacant property security and cleaning contract. Exciting stuff. Page 85.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Liam Rood from Housing Repairs Maintenance Service. I'm here today to request delegated authority for the provision of new contracts for vacant properties, security and cleaning and clearance support. This will provide valuable support to the housing turnaround demand that we've got in the service at the minute, and support our own in-house delivery teams. We've experienced a lot of demand over the last few months, and we've also experienced the impacts of COVID on our own direct workforce, which has made the support of this agreement even more valuable. It's worth noting that the ultimate long-term objective, alongside our TOM recommendations, so our target operating model, is to insource as much of this service as we can long-term. But we realise with peaks in demands and like I said, the impact of COVID, that short-term we need the support of the external contractors to support us in our need to deliver void properties back within the social housing sphere. It's a 4-year agreement that we propose, a 2+2, £555,000 a year for the housing revenue account. It also provides support to other housing clients within the place portfolio, so housing and our corporate colleagues. We've looked at other alternatives for this. So if we don't procure, we'll be relying, like I said, on our own in-house support, which is not sufficient at this point. We also would look at option 2, which was to extend the contract with the current supplier, which is not feasible as the contract has been already extended and has reached its natural conclusion. And the final option was to procure through a fully compliant framework. What we're trying to achieve here is a direct award through smaller local Sheffield businesses. So we're trying to move away from the bigger corporate entities that we've got, such as Orbis, the incumbent to the contract. We currently don't get sufficient level of service that we need to support. So what we want to do is break it into to an award at 2 levels. So it gives our services the opportunity to call off from a number of suppliers. And like I said, there'll be local Sheffield suppliers that would increase the value for money and increase the level of service that they give to us. That's everything from the report that I have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I've got a couple of questions on this, because the report is not sort of, Liam, fully detailed regarding sort of like the number of relets that we're expecting to do, the general the evidence that will clearly feed into how we will tender the contract, as in the standard of vacants that we find when people leave the properties, the number that we're expecting. Because that's not within the report, I can't particularly comment on that, but one thing I would say is, please don't leave us in a situation where it's sort of like done on a schedule of rates, where we get quite extortionate costs, because it's too difficult to do a bill of quantities as such. So we won't be inspecting the vacants. I'm assuming they will be self-inspected by the contractor. So the contractor will self-determine what repairs or work needs doing within a vacant, or are we going to be doing that and giving them a schedule of works that's required? That's my question.
So the first part of your question, so the impact is about 70 relets a week that this contract directly impacts. To answer another part of your question, the survey would always be done by our in-house team. So the inspectors would carry out the survey themselves. So they would be the ones that would be dictating the scope of the works. Any variations to that work would need to be evidenced by the contractor in advance of any payment being approved to that contractor.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much for that. That's reassured me. Jackie.
Yes, sorry. Thank you very much, Liam. I just wondered if you have thought about not having a 4-year contract, but having less. If the notion is that we're looking to build up our own internal service delivery, maintenance team, why would we go for a 4-year? Why wouldn't we go for 2 years? And I haven't seen the contracts obviously, but is it a 4-year with 2 years with an option for another 2 years, or is it a 4-year one?
It's a 2+2, so it's an initial 2-year term, and like I said, we want to give ourselves that flexibility with our long-term, medium and long-term objective to self-deliver this work. So what we've done is given ourselves that initial two-year term with the option to extend by a further 2.
And sorry, thank you, thanks very much. And just, I noticed that none of them are Sheffield based, the 3. So was there no Sheffield based providers on the list?
No, so this is the point that we were trying to make in the report. So we're trying to avoid the fully compliant frameworks that are in place. So we're trying to avoid these big corporate machines, if you like. We're actually going through OJU compliant frameworks outside of this, which will target Sheffield SMEs.
Yeah, this is exactly the same we had to do with the roofing contract, where the holder of the contract isn't Sheffield based, but written into the contract is that all the operatives and the local servicing of it has to be procured within the city boundaries. So we couldn't get a firm to take the contract management on, but we could build into it the local jobs, training and apprenticeships. And that's our target within the repair and maintenance service, to do everything. And Liam's quite right. We don't think we'll be in a position till after 18 months to bring this part of the contract back in, but there is other things we will be bringing in prior to that. So that's the guidance that I've given within the contract to this.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I also think that if you are trying to attract some of our smaller SMEs in Sheffield, they do need that sort of security, don't they? That it's the contract period, length of the contract is enough for them to either, get themselves together to expand or phase up towards being able to tender for it. So I also think it is definitely, when you deal with vacants, it is an investor safe type project in itself, because if you do it right when it's vacant, it saves you a lot of time further down the line in having to continuously return time after time to rectify things that should have been done when it was vacant. So I'm glad, especially at that number of relets, it really is important to get this right. So thank you very much. Any other, Mark?
Mute. Thank you, Julie. Yeah, sorry, it took a while to get off mute. Thanks for the report, Liam. Obviously, you've touched on the fact that after 2 or 4 years, we would look to be in a position of being able to do this work ourselves internally. So in the intervening times, those contractors that will be working on our behalf, would some of those operatives, if they so want to, be helped to come and work for the council? So that we can give those, because obviously we want to grow our local economy and retain monies within Sheffield as best as possible. But as we transition away from using these external providers to internal providers, those workers may not find themselves in a safe employment environment. So if we can bring them in-house and if we can prioritise that, should that be something they want to do? Is that something that we're exploring and looking to achieve?
Absolutely. The skill shortage is evident in terms of, you know, recruitment of direct people. It's been evident currently. So we would be looking to do some recruitment events and make that very clear that we're trying to promote and keep hold of those Sheffield-based people and bring them into the service to replace that outsourced element.
Okay, thank you, Liam.
Right, okay, any other further questions? No, okay then. So we have the recommendations, which is, I don't know what page it is, page 2 of the report, page 86 of our pack, to approve the tendering and the delegation. So can we approve those?
Agreed.
Agreed, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And then back to the agenda.
Chair, if I may cut across you, if you allow me to interject, please, just 2 minutes before you wrap up the meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, there's our Billy. Sorry. Timing as always. I just wanted to say and get noted for the minutes a series of thank yous, Chair. First of all, a thank you on behalf of myself and other Cabinet members. We know it's your last Cabinet meeting today. And I personally, and probably like other Cabinet members, have learnt so much from you with your expertise and your experience around the patch. But to navigate this council, this organisation, through 10 years of austerity, we've all been around when they talk about the 80s and the cuts, but this has been nothing in that kind of environment that we've had to go. And you've navigated it so professionally without a crossword over 10 years that you've got us to a place where we wanted to be. Also, a thank you from the organisation and officers for the way that you've maintained this organisation, that we go into the next year's budget healthier than a lot of other core cities. And also, we heard tonight members of the public will talk about my city. Well, I think on a big thank you from the city overall. You, like me, born and bred here, have always considered it our city, and we've done it for our citizens. So on behalf of our city, on behalf of the organisation and our Cabinet members, can I say thank you and we wish you well.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
Thank you. Can I also say thank you to you as well? As I said, you know, I did genuinely mean it right at the start that it's teamwork. It always is a team, and it's a team of Cabinet, it's a team of group, it's a team of officers in particular, and the way that we've worked with officers. And it is sad when you get members of the public that consistently and persistently wants to come into the chamber on just one tiny particular issue. I know to them it's an enormous issue, but in the old scheme of things, when you're having to provide for the 4th largest city in the country, and also half a million citizens, we have everyone to consider, and it is a big job for every one of us, and especially and including officers too. So I want to thank you all for the support that you've shown and being with me every step of the way. And I look forward to your future successes. And as I say, as a simple citizen, after May next year, I look forward to benefiting from your leadership and looking after our great city and me as a citizen. And I'll be a benefit of that too. So thank you. I also particularly and especially wanted to thank the officers. And I have to say, if I'm going to pick anyone out, I do have to thank Greg. Because as I said, this last year has been the most difficult of all of them, and they've all been difficult, every one of them, but especially this last year. And looking back in March, if anyone would have said we would have got through it in the way that we did, it would have been hard to see, but we have with your guidance, Greg. So thank you very much for that. So thank you very much to everyone, and I'll be watching you on the next cabinet meeting in January. And good luck.
Thank you.
Bye bye now.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye everybody. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.